Functions are blocks of code that we can call by referencing its name. They allow us to break our script's functionality up into a bunch of essentially mini scripts, which is what each function ends up being. Let's take a look at how we can use them inside of our bash script. I am inside of the what are functions directory. My script is called add_numbers. It is inside of our GitHub repo. And as always, the link will be in the description. Now, if you've been watching our videos, this probably looks a little different to you, right? We typically have, we have our shebang at the top, then maybe we had some variables, and then we had some commands run here. But we already see some different commands in here, and like, what is this open close parentheses? What's up with these square brackets? What's up with all this text inside of these square brackets? We've got a variable declaration down here. Then we're calling something that's called check even, and echo might be something that we're familiar with, right? So first of all, why is all this at the top? Well, when we use a function in our script, we need to first make sure it's defined before we call it. So that's why you'll most likely see variable definitions and function definitions at the top of a script. And then we actually call them towards the bottom, but we'll get to that. The way we define a function is by providing a name. Similar to when you declare variables, if you have multiple words that you need to use in a function, you'll separate them by an underscore. In this case, my function is called check_even. Then we provide an open and close parenthesis, no space there. And then we have an open and close curly bracket, which defines our actual code block. So any code inside of this open and close square bracket or curly bracket, is code for our function. So later on, when we go and call our function, we can just call its name check even, which we're doing here, but we'll talk about that a little bit more. Now, you can see I have this keyword local, which is something new as well. When we work with variables, we have the context or the concept of a scope. Now, because we haven't used functions up until now, all of our variables have been global, meaning we can use them anywhere inside of our script. But when we preface a variable definition, in this case, we have a variable called mod, and the value is 2. When we preference it with the local keyword, it means that the value of this variable will only exist inside of this function. If I were to try to call this variable outside of the function, you're not going to get a value because it doesn't exist. And I actually have an echo here to showcase that in a little bit. Okay, so just remember that this variable value only exists within our function because it's using the local scope. Okay, awesome. I've also got a command here to print out the value of mod is, and then we're calling this mod variable because this will print out inside of the function because, again, this value does exist inside of the function. Alrighty. Then we've got an if then else statement, which we saw in a previous video. What we're pretty much doing here is checking if our variable here is even or it's not. Very similar to an example that we've used before, but we're putting it inside of a functionality to be redundant there. The only difference here is instead of calling the value or the variable by its name mod, you can see we're using something a little different. We've got double quotes and then we've got a $1. What does that exactly mean? Well, when you're working with functions, you can give it parameters because oftentimes you won't know what the exact value that you want to work with or expression you want to work with, but you will know that you want to work with a value or an expression. When we pass the parameters to a function or we call the function, we can give it parameters. So in this case, down here on number 17, we are passing in a variable called number, which we've defined up here. So we have the number 2344, and then we call the function check even. And then we have the $number, which says, okay, we're sending to this function the variable number. And each place, so you can see there's a space here. That means anything after the space counts as a parameter that we're sending over. We're using $1 here because well, it starts technically at $0, but that $0 is the space for the command. So this is $0, $1. If I had another space and then I had another value here, that would be $2. If I called this 2 or something like that. If I had a variable here that was called 2 and then the value was 2 and then I wanted to send it, I could also send this as a parameter to our function, and I would access this using the $2. But we're going to use 1 here. I'm going to remove this. Don't need this here. And don't need this here. And the rest of this function is a if then else statement, which we've seen before. So let's go ahead and run this here. And I am inside of the proper directory. Awesome. And then we're just going to go ahead and execute. Oh, what's the name here? Oh, the name is add numbers. We're going to, all right, add numbers. And let's run this, and you see the value of 2, the value of mod is 2. The number 2344, 2344 is even, and then I have a blank, a blank line here. So I probably should add a message here. Let's say the value of mod is, and then let's run this once more. Let's move this up here so we have a little bit more space, and we'll run this once more. The value of mod is 2, and that's because we're printing out here. It probably would help if we did inside of a function, and then we can type in an outside of function. And once more, let's just change this to be a number that's not even. Let's put 15. Awesome. Actually, let's clear this once more, and let's run this once more here. The value of mod is 2 inside of the function. The value 15, the number 15 is odd, and the value of blank space is blank space outside of function. Again, because this mod variable does not exist outside of the function because of the scope, it's using local, it doesn't work. And then the rest of the if then else statement executed each time we provide a number there. Right here, we can see that it doesn't, or it does or does calculate if it's even or not. That's pretty straightforward. And that's pretty much how functions work. You can make as many functions as you need, but just remember that they need to exist before you call them. So if I tried to move this line up here, so let's move it right to number 2 here, and let's run this once more. You can see that it says check even command is not found because, again, the definition of a function needs to exist before it's actually called. Let's move this down here once more, and then that is going to work. Let's change the number to that there. Let's run this here, and you see that it is odd, and it's working once again. So keep that in mind. Alrighty, so up until now, our scripts have been able to run once and then they stop, which sometimes might be the functionality that you're looking for, but oftentimes we want them to repeat depending on a sequence, depending if it meets a condition, if it doesn't meet a condition. And for this, we have loops. So in the next video, let's take a look at loops.